All right, hey everyone, welcome to Making Multifamily Money. So today I kind of want to just give an update as to the cash out refinance I'm doing with my 20 unit apartment complex. So this has probably been the hardest loan I've ever done. I kind of talked about it in my last session that was recorded, uploaded to YouTube, but I initiated this loan process in April, about 3 months ago. So it took me 90 days to complete a cash out refinance on my 20 unit apartment complex. And when I bought my apartment complex, the same one, it took only 45 days with due diligence. When I bought my 26 unit, it took 45 days. When I bought, no, sorry, 60 days. When I bought my mobile home park, it took 45 days. Any single family home I bought, it, typically went 45 to 60 days. So this was kind of the first time that the loan was very challenging. I don't know if it's because of the current market. Like, a lot of people are not optimistic about real estate right now, which could be. Or the bank that I'm working with, they did recently get purchased. So I use Bank of the West. They got purchased by Bank of Montreal, and there's been a lot of turnover. So maybe all the A players are not there anymore. And then you're kind of stuck with the B or C team, and maybe they're not as knowledgeable or great. But in any case, it took 90 days, and let me go through all the hiccups that basically happened. So, number one, they weren't as transparent. Like, they kept on telling me you're approved, but not really approved. So it was a little bit confusing for me. I don't know. They're just trying to, string you along so you don't, go to other lenders. But fortunately, I was reaching out to multiple lenders and none of them would bite. So, I just said, okay, well, I'll just continue to explore my options, but if they pan out, great, right? So after a while, they gave me some loan terms. Bank of the West actually gave me the best loan terms out of all the ones I was quoted. It's 75% loan to value, 7% interest, amortized over 30 years. So, those were the best loan terms I was getting. Other community banks was quoting me around 75% loan to value. They would do, I think, 20, 25 year amortized, and the interest rate was 8.5 to 9%. So as you can tell, Bank of the West had better amortization and better interest rates. So because of that, I went with them. I had a prior existing relationship with Bank of the West. They actually financed my 26 unit. And, just throughout the entire process, like, it just took forever, like, just for the underwriting. Like, I had so many questions asked. My tax returns for the past 3 years were scrutinized heavily. I've never been scrutinized that much on my tax returns ever. Because if apartment complexes, they look at the asset first and use second, right? Because all they care about is how much cash flow or how much income is the apartment making, and they don't really care as much about your debt to income ratio. But this was the first time where they're really hounding my debt to income ratio, and they're questioning things like, why is your W-2 income going down over the past 3 years? And the reason was because I, job hopped, got laid off and moved to a market where they pay less. So if you kind of factor all those in, my W-2 income went down. On top of that, on my tax returns, which is kind of a lesson learned, is I'm doing 3 value-add real estate deals, right? My 26 unit is renovation. My mobile home park is renovation. My 20 unit is renovation. So when you're renovating it, your tax returns look terrible because, you're writing stuff off, right? Like, I'm renovating, 40 units over the past year, and you write it off as depreciation. But despite it being depreciation and, written over 5 years, so let's just say you have 100,000 of renovation, you'll write off 20K per year over 5 years, unless you want to do accelerated depreciation, where you can do all 100, in the first year. But because I wasn't making income, then I just spread out over 5 years. So my tax returns didn't look very good, right? And if you want to buy a lot of real estate, like me, eventually you hit the point where your tax returns look terrible, right? That's just kind of the downside of scaling. And you have to, work with lenders who don't care about your personal income, your tax returns, but you pay a higher interest rate as a result, right? But anyways, they were heavily scrutinizing my tax return. they just kept on throwing curveballs at me at the 11th hour. And it was starting to get annoying. Like every time I was like, oh, this thing come up at the 11th hour. I need this document at the 11th hour. I need to get a land survey at the 11th hour. And, just a bunch of requests. And it just felt like it was always the 11th hour for like a month. Right. So, that was annoying. And I financed my 20 unit with a hard money lender and it matured already. Like it was a 12-month term. It matured in May 12th. And, they were nice enough to give me more time because they knew that I was working to do a refinance. I had an approval letter, all that stuff. But despite that, like it still took 90 days to close. And, fortunately my hard money lender is nice about it, but, they kind of hound me every week, about when am I going to close, right? So it almost kind of feels like I joke, like it's like a loan shark coming after me. So I was hit with that. And then now, finally, I got the closing documents and had them signed, had them notarized. Then after I mailed that in, they sent me more documents I needed to like sign and notarize. And, that was really frustrating. I was like, why couldn't you just do all in one packet? And then I mailed it over. And now finally, title has the documents. Now they're waiting for Bank of the West to send their documents over. So there's just all these like massive delays. Everything went like unplanned. My appraisal wasn't as high as I thought, right? So, I'm going to do a video where I'm actually going to record me analyzing my appraisal. But long story short, it appraised at $520,000. I thought I was going to appraise at around 600,000, about 650, I'd say about $650,000. So my appraisal was roughly $130,000 less than what I thought. So what happens is I'm owning 7% loan to value of 520,000. My new loan is 390K, but I'm all into my deal at 470K. So I'm leaving money in the deal, right? So I kind of did the math. I'm pulling out 80K during the cash out refinance, but I'm leaving about 100K in the deal. So, I couldn't execute a full BRRRR. And I think part of the reason for that was two things. Number one, interest rates are a lot higher, right? So if interest rate is at 7.5%, and 2 years ago I was getting 4%, to hit a debt service coverage ratio of 1.25, you need more income, right? The same income to hit that interest rate of 7.5. So because of that, you take a less of a loan, which will then affect your value. That's the one thing that affected my value. The second thing that affected my value was they value multifamily based on the net operating income divided by the market cap rate. So two things are working against me in the net operating income. Number one is when you're stabilizing 20 units and renovating it, it's a constant churn, right? 2 tenants leave, you renovate 2 units, rent them out. 2 more tenants leave, you renovate it, rent it out. It's just a continuous churn, right? So I basically renovated like 15 out of 20 of my units over the past year. And as a result, it was a constant battle where, I'd fill a unit and then renovate it, rent it out, and then one will be vacant again. So it's like a constant churn for that. And, so because of that, obviously my income is not going to be as great as I'd like it to be, right? You can kind of sell them that, hey, I'm, by the time I got the refinance approved, I was 90% occupancy. So 18 out of 20 units were occupied. And my rent roll was around close to $9,000 a month, right? So they can kind of use that to project forward. But what kind of burned me was the expenses were a bit high. When you first take over a C-class apartment complex, there's a lot of CapEx, right? I'm constantly renovating units. Even the units that haven't been renovated, an AC unit broke down and it costed me $4,000 to replace the entire AC unit just for one unit, right? So you're constantly being hit by things breaking down. Water heater broke down, air condenser broke down, just fridges are breaking down. So, when you own like C-class apartment complexes, even despite renovations for at least the first 2 to 3 years, you're constantly just throwing money to fix these things, to stabilize it, right? But because I've only had 12 months of owning the property, I haven't, taken care of these things yet. So I haven't had what I call a seasoning period where you make your rent, your profit and loss statement look really good, right? Like you want to get the max income, right? You want everything rented out, 90% occupancy, and you want to make your expense as low as possible and show that for at least 6 to 12 months, ideally. Then from there, that's how they predict your expense, right? So for me, my expense was 50%, and that's what they used. So you take your income, right? Let's just say it's 100,000, 50% was expense. So that's 50K, and my net operating income is 50K, right? And the market cap rate was 10%. It's a 10 cap. So you do the math, right? 50K divided by 0.1, that's $500,000 appraisal. So what hurt me was the fact that I didn't have, 6 to 12 month seasoning period where I can lower the expense. And then number two is the cap rates expanded. So when I bought this property, to be honest, I thought it was an 8.5 to 9 cap market. But on the appraisal report, it's a 10 cap market. So because of that, the value dropped significantly, right? Like if I were to take that same net operating income of 50,000 and you divide it by a 9 cap versus a 10 cap, the valuation is closer to 600,000, which is what I thought I'd be around, right? So those two things hurt me. My expense ratio was higher than I would like due to lack of a seasoning period. And number two is the cap rate expanded. So what does that do? That lowers the value of the property. I get a smaller loan. There's a higher interest rate. So I need a higher income in order to hit the debt service coverage ratio. So a lot of things are working against me, right? So, it's pretty interesting experience. I mean, despite me owning 90 units, this is my first full cycle BRRRR where I bought it, renovated it, rented out, and then did a refinance. And I did a refinance during a bad time, right? Like, compared to like a year, even 2 years ago, this is like, relatively speaking, a hard time, not a great time. And it's very volatile, right? Like interest rates are continuing to raise. So I had to basically do a rate cap deposit where I would put a deposit down, which goes towards closing, and I would lock in my interest rate. And I'm glad I did that because interest rates went up, right? I locked in around a 7% after some discounts. But, if I didn't do that, it'd probably be around 8 to 8.5%. And all these delays were happening, right? Like out of my control. So I'm actually glad that I bought that rate cap to lock it in. So overall, that's just kind of been my experience doing a cash out refinance. I honestly thought, oh, if I buy real estate in 45 to 60 days, a cash out refinance should be easy. Like I did a cash out refinance for my single family home in 2021. It was the easiest process ever. And I thought that it'd be the same exact easy process, but I was definitely humbled. But, on the flip side, I am learning a lot, and, things just don't go as planned. But if you have a long-term outlook, that's when the true wealth was made with real estate, right? So, after the new loan, at my current occupancy and expense ratio, I'm probably just going to cash flow not too much, like maybe about $1,500 a month. If I rent out the last 2 units, it'll increase my cash flow to $2,500. But like I said, I don't think I'm going to cash flow on this property until, hopefully maybe, 2025 when interest rates drop down. I'll refinance to a lower interest rate, and maybe the value goes up or rent going up. And then at that point, I'll cash flow a little better. So overall, just been my experience. Hopefully you guys learned something from that. And I guess now I just want to open it up to some questions. And it's only you, Isaac. So all yours. Any questions? Okay, if no questions, I kind of another point that I kind of experienced, I'd say, over the past, I'd just say year. So I think from the span of August of 2021 until May of 2022, I literally bought 80 units of real estate, right? Like real fast. I bought 80 units of real estate. And what's even crazy, so 80 units of real estate in 8 months. I actually made a YouTube video talking about that. What's even crazier about that stat is during that same 8-month window, I actually had an RV park under contract, which ended up falling through due to due diligence. It had a lagoon and a well that didn't have permits. The well was for agricultural use only, not for drinking use. And then the lagoon had no permit because it was undersized and it wouldn't fulfill the park. So, sorry. Go ahead, Isaac. You can either type it or you can ask it. I guess as Isaac kind of typed his question. Oh, got it. Yeah. So the first question for those of you can't see is how early do you advise folks to start the refinance process? So for me, I started the refinance process mid-April when my hard money loan was due mid-May, right? So I gave myself a 30-day leeway to do that. But to be honest, the hard money loan is due mid-May. And given what I know, I would say start it as soon as possible. Like the moment that you hit a good occupancy. So just keep in mind that they want your apartment complex to be, and it varies per lender. Some lenders wanted 70%, some wanted 80%, some want 90%. But a safe bet is if you're at 90%, you're probably good, or you anticipate hitting 90% by the time you get approval. That's when you start to engage your, refinance, right? So, that's kind of what I did. I kind of started a bit later than I would like. And the reason for that was because I was so distracted, right? Because I'm renovating my mobile home park. I'm renovating my 26 unit. I have single family homes. So because I was juggling so many balls, I dropped some, to be honest, right? Like I'm fully transparent about that. I'm a one-man show. I work full time. And, if you're doing what I'm doing by yourself without a team, you're going to drop some balls, right? So for me, I started a bit too late, but at least I gave myself a month. And what I did was I literally reached out to every single bank that I knew. I would Google local community banks to Enid, Oklahoma, or local community banks, Oklahoma, and just mass reach out to them. I engaged multiple mortgage brokers because I had my 20 unit, it's in a small market. So a lot of things were working against me, right? I made a YouTube video talking about it as well, but there's multiple things working for me. Number one, it was a tertiary market, right? The population was 50,000. A lot of lenders do not like that. Number two is the value of the apartment complex wasn't that high, right? Like some lenders won't even work with you unless the loan is at least $500,000. So if my property appraised at $500,000, I can't get a loan for $500,000 unless you're 100% leverage, right? Number three is some lenders do not like it when your rents are too small. So in the market that I'm in, your rents are 500 to 700, right? Oklahoma City is 700. Enid, Oklahoma is 500, right? For C-class apartment complexes. Some lenders will not even talk to you unless their rents are over 1,000. Number four is they want a certain price per unit, right? Like the minimum is 50K per unit. You have 20 units, that has to be $1 million, right? Like, no way, mine's not 50K per unit. So because of that, I reached out to a bunch of local community banks. A lot of them rejected me. A lot of them gave me some quotes and terms, but, it was just very difficult. And pretty much my option was Bank of the West, which gave me the best terms actually, or I was going to use a DSCR loan where literally it would be 7% loan to value, 30-year fixed, no prepayment penalty, but my interest rate was literally 12%, right? Like keep in mind a year ago, my interest rate was 9%. And now the interest rate went to 12%. So it was a huge jump up, right? So that was my worst case scenario, or I could extend my hard money loan, right? That was an option too, where I could have paid an extension fee to extend my hard money loan another 6 months. And hopefully in 6 months, I can better stabilize the apartment complex. Maybe the lending environment will change in 6 months and it'll do better, right? So just buying time. So those are my three options. To kind of recap it, since my brain's a little all over today, Bank of the West was the best loan terms. I ended up going with them. I could extend my hard money loan for 6 months, but the extension, they're going to raise my interest from 9 to 11% interest only. Or I could have done a debt service coverage ratio, or DSCR loan, where I'd get 7% cash out or 7% loan to value, but my interest rate was like 12%, right? So those are my three options, and I went with the best one. But as I kind of explained earlier and went on a huge rant on, it was a hard loan, right, to do. So what do you prioritize? If you want better loan terms, it's going to be a lot harder to be approved and a lot more work, right? If I did the DSCR loan, it probably would have been very easy, no tax returns, none of that stuff, but you pay a high interest rate, right? So like pick your poison. So hopefully that answers that question. The second question is there a reason you didn't challenge the appraisal? Yes, great question. So if you actually watched the last session that I did, my two of my other mentees were kind of recommending me to do that. And, to be honest, I didn't challenge it for number one, for speed. I just kind of figured that, if I had to get another appraisal, it's going to take another month. And, time is not on my side right now. So I didn't want to, delay another month. As I mentioned, my hard money loan was matured already, and I didn't want to cause more delay. And yeah, so that's kind of the approach I did. And I didn't want to pay an additional like $3,000, right? Because appraisals are like $3,000 when you do it. So, it's expensive, takes a lot of time, and I think I just wasn't very optimistic that it'd be better. I think appraisals, real estate right now just have a negative black cloud over it, for lack of a better word. And, loan officers are more conservative, appraisers are more conservative, everyone is just more conservative, and they have a negative outlook, right? Like I did kind of ask Bank of the West, like, can we challenge the appraisal report? But he kind of wrote it off, asking like, oh yeah, have we ever successfully challenged an appraisal? They said no. I didn't really push it further. I'll be honest, my loan officer that I'm working with seems very inexperienced. He doesn't, compared to the same Bank of the other Bank of the West loan officer that I use, he seems like he doesn't really know what he's doing. But I'm just want to push it through, and it was the best loan terms. So maybe he just did that to like not to make it move smoother. But honestly, like if it was me, I would have preferred to just literally talk to the appraiser directly. Like what I typically do is when the appraiser is there, and I guess to be fair, the appraiser didn't go into any of my units. Like I think he walked into like, because he asked me like, hey, can you send me your P&L, your profit and loss statement, your rent roll? Can you give me a list of all the renovations that you did? And can you just show me one vacant unit? Right. And the one unit that I showed him wasn't renovated. Right. But I literally renovated 15 other units. And the reason why he showed him a vacant unit was because it just, you don't have to notify the tenants, right? It's just a little inconvenient for the tenants. You have to put the notice, they come in and then they see it. But, like if you were to see some of my nicer units that were fully renovated, I had a burned out unit that was completely burned down, and they renovate super nice, right? And if he saw that, it might have made a great impression on him. So he would maybe give me a higher appraisal value, right? Because I know, like, so based on the income approach, it appraised at 520K. Based on the sales approach, it appraised at 560K. If I listed my 20 for 560K right now, I would sell that easily. That's way underpriced, right? So, I didn't seem like it was worth it to challenge. I mean, I did kind of challenge, but I wasn't really pushing it. I was just more focused on, closing my loan and just moving on, right? Because I know that like, whatever, like my interest rate's terrible at 7%. If it lowers in 2 years, I'm gonna do another refinance in 2 years, right? So like, it just wasn't worth it arguing it, and I just didn't feel like the need to do it. But that was kind of my mindset at the time. So hopefully that answers that question. And then next one is, or the terms of the loan fixed for 30 years, or is it 3, 5, or 10 years? Yeah, great question. So when you do commercial real estate and you get a commercial loan, it's never fixed for 30 years, or for most of them, they're not fixed for 30 years, right? Like I misspoke a bit. The DSCR loan was fixed for 30 years. but most typical commercial loans, you're fixed for either 1, 3, 5, 7, or 10 years, right? So let me kind of share the terms of my loan that I got, right? So I was quoted 7% fixed for 7 years, and it's amortized over 30 years, right? So those are my loan terms. And typically how it works is if you're the longer you are fixed, the higher interest rate is. The less you are fixed, the lower your interest rate is, right? So for that, take that same example, if I did 3 years fixed instead of 7 years fixed, I would have been slightly below 7% interest. It might have been like 6.8%, right? And then at 5-year fixed, it's 6.9. At 7 years fixed, it was 7. At 10 years fixed, it was 7.25, right? So for me, what I kind of teach in my course with my students is you want at least 7 years fixed, 7 to 10 years, right? Like for my 26 unit, I locked in 10 years fixed at 4%, good interest rate, right? For this one, why I chose 7 years fixed, even though I think interest rates are going to go down in 2025, is like, what if interest rates don't go down in 2025, right? I don't know. That was my prediction, but I don't have a crystal ball. So I want my control, right? Like I already knew 7% was good in this market. So I want to fix it for that term. And then worst case in 2 years or 3 years, if the interest rates go improve, I can do a cash out refi again. But the one thing that you need to be cautious of is look at the prepayment penalty, right? So Bank of the West is big on prepayment penalties. So what they do is they'll say like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So what does that mean? 5 means if you refinance in the first year, you have to pay 5% of the loan value. 4 means if you refinance in the second year, 4% of the loan value. And then so on, right? So third year, 3% of the loan value, right? So the terms that the prepayment penalty I got was 3, 2, 1, 1, 1, 1, and up until 7. So if I were to do a refinance on the first year, let's say a year from now, I pay 3% of my loan value. If I wait 2 years, I pay 2%. If I wait 3 years, it's 1%. So my goal was I just want it down to 1%. So by year 3, I'm looking to do another refinance, most likely. So that's why I didn't do the 10 years, because as you go from 1 year to 10 year, the 10-year one has the highest prepayment penalty, right? So that's why I say it's a give and take, right? If you get it fixed for 10 years, you pay a higher interest rate, and you have a higher prepayment penalty. So just be very cognizant and know what your exit strategy is, right? For me, I'm always going to do a cash out refinance. If the value goes up, I want to pull money out. If interest rates go down, I want to lower my rate, right? So I kind of figure that I might do that in 3 to 5 years. So to be conservative, I always do 7 to 10 year fixed, right? But the key is to get all your, so I would have my law officers give me all the loan terms and break it down. What's the interest rate? How long is it fixed? What's the prepayment penalty? And then what would be the monthly payment, principal and interest, right? And then they show you all the options. The option for a 10-year fixed, 7-year fixed, 5-year fixed, 3-year fixed. So I have 4 options, right? So that's what I look at for that. So most traditional commercial lenders, to kind of summarize, it's usually fixed 3 to 10 years. There are some DSCR lenders where it's fixed for 30 years, but those are more rare. So that's just kind of been my experience. And for the local community banks, they don't even give you option for 5 or 7 or 10-year fixed. The most they did was 1 or 3-year fixed. So when you do a local community bank, they're easier to work with, but keep in mind that number 1, your interest rate's gonna be higher. Number 2, your fixed term is gonna be less. And number 3 is the amortization might be lower, right? It might be 20 or 25 years versus 30. So that's what I said, pick your poison, right? Like local community banks are great. Like I'm probably gonna have to use them because I'm maxed out Bank of the West. Like Bank of the West told me we're only allowed to give you $1.5 million of loans, which actually I'm not there yet, but like if the values of my 26 unit goes up and my 20 unit goes up and I do another cash out refinance, at that point I might hit my limit and I can't use Bank of the West anymore. So I need to use these local community banks, right? That's why it's great to have relationships with local community banks. I never understood it until I started maxing out loans, right? And And then what type of closing costs do you incur? Estimated closing costs 3% or different. That's a great question. Let me actually. I literally just signed. Um, I literally just signed my settlement statement for my cash out refinance. So let me pull it up. Let's see. I literally just had it. Here we are. I'll tell you exactly what my costs are. And once this loan is done, I'm gonna record a video where um, I'm analyzing my HUD-1 statement. I just don't want to do it right now because it's not finalized yet. Let's see. Here it is. So let me tell you how much my cost is. So basically, Bank of the West, they charged a origination fee of about 0.5%. So if your loan is around 390, my origination fee is 1,200. So it's like roughly 0.5%. The appraisal fee was about 2,400, and then all the title escrow cost. It's roughly around. Geez, what is this? At least another $5,000. So if you kind of add all that up, it's almost like $10,000, which is about 3%. Yeah. So a good estimate is actually around 3%, around 3 to 4% is what I actually paid for my closing cost. So it's actually a pretty good take there. And I just saw your email. I will share you my contact with Bank of the West, but I will put a caveat that it wasn't the smoothest experience, to be honest. Bank of the West gives great loan terms, but I don't know, just that experience that I went through with my current loan officer wasn't the greatest. I would recommend Bank of the West. I'm not sure I'd recommend my specific loan officer. I can definitely reach out to see if there's someone else on the team, but it just, I don't know, it was just a hard refinance, and it should have not been that way. And it just kind of felt like my loan officer was just saying stuff, but his actions didn't align with his words. And that was really rubbing me the wrong way. And it was just really difficult to get a hold of this guy too. Like most loan officers that I work with, they're literally usually on speed dial. Like whether you call them at like 8 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 a.m., like they always like respond timely, right? But this loan officer, like it was so difficult. He never picks up. He was on PTO all the time, and just nothing was done smooth. It just felt like he didn't know what he was doing. Like it was as if it was his first loan that he did. So I don't. That's the caveat. I mean, I don't mind giving you the contact, but just preface it that by me giving the contact, I'm not. Like I said, I prefer to work with someone else, or maybe the bank. Like I said, it's going through transition, and people aren't. You don't have the A players anymore. It's all the B team, and maybe it's a complete shit show. I don't know. It just seemed like no one really knew what they're doing. And like I said, I've done this multiple times, and I just never experienced it this poorly executed, in the 6 years I've been doing real estate. So yeah, but happy to share a contact. 'Cause they do offer lines of credits, but I will preface with that. Make sure your tax returns are great. I'm not sure if you have a W-2 or not, but your tax returns need to be great, and they ask for a lot of documents, and they're going to throw a lot of documents at you at the last minute, right? So, if you're okay with that, then it may work. Any other questions, Isaac? Cool, cool. Well, I'm not sure if you're open to it, Isaac, but would love to kind of learn a little bit about yourself, if you don't mind, sharing. You don't need to do video if you want to maintain privacy, but would kind of love to kind of learn about yourself and kind of what your goal is. um, to see if I can kind of give you some guidance or some insight. Okay, cool, cool. Well, if no other questions or comments, then thank you for hopping on to today's session. If you have any questions, just please reach out to me. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and leave any comments. Because I like doing these sessions, for free, just to provide value and just to really learn from others as well as learn myself. So it's something that I really like doing, despite all else I'm doing. So hopefully you guys find value from this, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much.